My name is Avis Wanda McClinton. I'm an attender at Abington Friends Meeting in Jenkintown, Pennsylvania. And I come to talk about a leading that I have. My leading is called, we titled it 339 Manumissions and Beyond Project. And now I would like to have you listen to my colleagues.
I am David Satin Lopez, and I have been interested in learning more about what happened to the people who were manumitted by Quakers. I was doing some of the digitization work and archival work at Haverford College with these documents a couple years ago, which is how I got linked up with Avis. And have continued to be curious and want to know what happened to these folks. So I'll pass it over to Kitty.
My name is Kitty Taylor Mizuno, and I'm a Quaker from New Jersey. My membership is in Haddonfield, and I'm sojourning in California in Salinas. But I recently learned through the documents that David was talking about at Haverford College. There are manumission documents there that prove that Quakers held people in slavery, and among them was one of my ancestors. I grew up on my family's farm in Cinnaminson, New Jersey, the Taylor farm. I don't know if you can see behind me, there's a map of that farm on the wall. That's my dad's side of the family. And it's a Quaker farm. It's been there for 300 years. My mother's side of the family is from across the river in Philadelphia, and her ancestors have been in the Philadelphia area for since the 1600s, when they immigrated from Wales. But the documents at Haverford College prove that Celia, who is 36 years old, and Caesar, age 48, were held in slavery by Jonathan Evans, my 4 times great-grandfather, who signed manumission documents for them on January 27, 1779. In our presentation today, you'll see their names, Celia and Caesar, all the way. We'll have it. You'll see a slide with more than 400 names. Down at the bottom, you will see those 2 people who were enslaved by my great I'm not sure how many I said, grandfather. There's no last names for them, and I would like to know what happened in their lives after they were manumitted by my ancestor. Were they manumitted right away? If they were, how were they supported? And who were their descendants? And I believe their descendants also would like to know more about them too. So that's why I'm part of this project. And I also, makes me think about how, if my ancestors held people in slavery, how does that affect the way myself and others in my family, the way we think, the way we live, the assumptions that we make? I think it must have a profound effect. So that's where my commitment to this project comes from, and I'll pass it on to Dennis.
Yes, so my name is Dennis Gregg. I was actually born in Philadelphia, grew up in New Jersey, became a Quaker in Tennessee, a member of the Crossville Monthly Meeting, and the Southern Appalachian Yearly Meeting and Association. I'm now sojourning in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'm talking to you today from Petaluma, California. So sounds like I've been moving around a lot in my life. But I've known Avis for many years, and we got talking about this project and her leading, and I felt like I could support it and very interested in this time and place in history.
Thank you, colleagues. Audience, what we trying to make is a comfortable place for us to talk about Quaker slaveholding heritage. I'm most interested in hearing what you feel and what y'all think about what we're trying to do. And we're going to start right now, knowing that all of us, black and white, Quaker and non-Quaker, put this together for you today. Okay, you ready to start, group? With my kindergarten picture. I grew up in Pennsylvania, I still live in the same house I came home when I was born. Lucky me, very lucky me. Can you find me in that picture? I was people didn't realize that in the North, we were segregated. I was in segregated school until I came to the 3rd grade. And that's when my township integrated us. Dave, it's a block on there. Can you take that away for a second? Dave, would you show them where I'm at? That's me. That one right there. That's me. That's 5-year-old Avis. Everybody in there lives in my red line community. Half of us are dead now. We all are 65. I turned 65 this year, so all of them are 65. I'm the youngest one of the class. I just wanted to show you that where I came from. So that's me. We was the pride and joy of our families. Next day, please.
So next in this presentation, we wanted to just do a quick land acknowledgement. We wanted to acknowledge the enslaved Africans who worked this land and built the city of Barnegat and the surrounding areas. We also want to acknowledge the land that we are on today is the ancestral homeland of the Lenape people, all of whose presence and resilience in Barnegat, New Jersey continues to this day. And we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and present on this land and understand that an acknowledgement is not decolonization, and that decolonization requires the return of land, honoring of treaties, and sovereignty. Thank you.
Oh,
Kitty, you muted.
so sorry. Our project is called the 339 Manumissions and Beyond Project. We were established in 2022, and we've been working on our reparative genealogical research presentation to find out what happened to the people who were manumitted by Quakers. And we have just introduced ourselves: Avis Wanda McClinton, Quaker preservationist, Dennis Gregg, David Satin Lopez, and Kitty Mizano.
The Religious Society of Friends. Yes, Quakers enslaved Africans. For my project and my look on things, I'm never going to be showing pictures of a hurt Black person. So we looked through a lot of pictures from the slave era in America, and I found some children and a lady. As you can see, that baby is kind of big, and that lady was thick. She was like a cow that she had to be with that baby all the time to keep the baby in milk. What happened to her baby? That's always when I look at her face, her eyes, where her baby at? And the 2 little boys, they just look so forlorn that they jumped out at me. Why I wanted these in this presentation is to humanize these people. People just say slave. They didn't grow up to be slaves, they were enslaved. They had dreams, they loved, they cried, they were happy, just like me and you. And I want you to keep that in your mind as we go through these slides.
We want to just give you a little bit of context in terms of timeline here. The first Africans were brought into Virginia in 1619. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through a few dates to get you oriented. So William Penn his family was given the property which became Pennsylvania. It was called a proprietary colony because it actually belonged to one family, not a corporation, not any other ways that we would do it. And that happened in 1681. And most of you, during this presentation, I'm going to talk about some Quaker history at various times. It's going to be very abbreviated, and there's a lot more that is known and lots has been written. But that's not the primary purpose of what we're doing here, but I want to give you a context. So 1681, William Penn comes, and the primary purpose for him was to, yes, establish a colony, but also to sell off the land, which is how he and his family would get their money back, because it was in exchange for money that his father had lent to the king. Once he got here, a slave ship arrived, and he bought people to keep as slaves to help him. And he ended up being a slaveholder with 12 slaves that were used primarily in his household, and to keep, watch out for his horses and things like that. But he wasn't a farmer, so they weren't doing farming work. And then, because people are also interested in, and we'll talk about it more, about how did Quakers react to slavery. So we're pointing out that in 1688, which is 7 years later, this is when the Germantown Declaration of a meeting was published, in which these Quakers said, we think slavery is immoral and we shouldn't be doing it. So it isn't 100% that all Quakers were slavers, and it certainly isn't 100% that all Quakers were abolitionists in 1680s, but both of those things were going on very early on. And so it took a long time before Quakers got to where they began to unite behind the idea that slavery was immoral and wrong. And their first and Philadelphia Yearly Meeting was, there were people aside from the Germantown people who came along, and again, about much of this, but Benjamin Lay, and then later John Woolman and Anthony Benezet, and there's a whole number of people. But finally, by 1758, the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting united and saying that you could no longer be a slave, a member of the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, if you engaged in slave trading. But it did not say you could not hold people in bondage. It just said you couldn't trade them. Some monthly meetings, however, took that and went beyond that and began to pressure folks to manumit their slaves. So because of that, these manumissions began to get recorded at the monthly meetings starting in 1765, and in 1774 the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting made it a disownable offense, and that also, now one of the ways you get out of that is to say, okay, I'm an enslaver, and if I give you this manumission document, then I can still be a Quaker. And there were many Quakers who left, who said, I'm not giving up the privileges and advantages of being an enslaver. But the ones who wanted to stay had to show manumission documents. And so the last of those manumission documents is from 1790. Just to kind of, again, put it into context, so the Civil War happened later in the 1860s, and then we have the Juneteenth, 1865, which is now a national holiday, the time that federal U.S. troops made it to Galveston, Texas, and let people know that the war was over and that the people who were enslaved were no longer in bondage. So those are just kind of giving you some senses of where these time period we're talking about fits into a timeline. We'll talk more about Quaker history in a minute.
My turn. I asked David to put up all the names of the people on the manumission, and there they are. We found Haverford archaeologists found 339 manumission documents, but the total number of people is 413 because some they let their children or husband or wife or lose. But I want y'all to just take a moment and look at the names. You might see your name in there. You might see your daddy's name in there. These people, family were enslaved by Quakers over 100 years. So their grandfather, their daddy, their mommy, their sisters and brothers at this time. Therefore God goes I have to find a way to explain my leading to you. And this is one of the ways.
So we wanted to give folks a look at what a manumission actually looks like in the archive. And so here we have a manumission for Benjamin Mather, who is being free, or Benjamin Mather is the enslaver, freeing the enslaved person, Jack. So the manumission is a legal document and the act that promises freedom to the enslaved, either immediately or at a later date. This promise may not have always been kept, and these papers were commonly called freedom papers. So as you can see here, the manumissions are legal documents, so they often are very formulaic. In this case, it's even like fill in the blank, where they've typed out some things, and then the person will come in and handwrite the specifics of the manumission itself. And now we are going to read this one.
So this is a manumission document for, if my math is correct, an 11-year-old boy. I, Benjamin Mather, of the Township of Cheltenham and County of Philadelphia, do hereby set free from bondage my Negro lad Jack, when he shall arrive at the age of 21 years, which will be on the 7th day of the 4th month, Anno Domini 1786, and do for myself, my executors and administrators, release unto said Jack all my right and all my claim whatsoever as to his person, or to any estate he may acquire, hereby declaring said Jack absolutely free, without any interruption from me, or any person claiming under me. In witness thereof, I have hereto set my hand and seal this 4th day of the 6th month in the year of our Lord, 1776, sealed and delivered by Benjamin Mather in the presence of John Parrish and Robert Verhey.
Nice.
So from those manumissions, which, yeah, can be a little difficult to read, we went ahead and were able to kind of figure out what is the key information in these manumissions that we might want to have in data form in a spreadsheet. So things like the date, the name of the enslaved person, the age and the freed ages when they will gain their freedom, genders, monthly meetings and place names, the name of the slaveholder, the gender of the slaveholder, and then, yeah, the other people involved, such as witnesses and clerks, who are also a part of that manumission process. So here we have two manumissions, one for Jack that we just read, and then we also have one that we wanted to show for Phoebe and her children. And so, yeah, as you can see for Phoebe, right, we don't actually have any ages listed for her. So just to kind of show the range of information you might find in a manumission and information you might not. In Jack's case, we saw that he would be freed supposedly at age 21, which would be 10 years after the manumission signing took place. So we can do some math and figure out he was likely around the age of 11 at that time. So there is, yeah, some ways we can begin to kind of fill in some gaps from the manumissions, but in general, they're pretty bare bones. It is a legal document. Last thing we did want to mention about Phoebe here is that her enslaver, Rebecca Steele, just going to kind of talk about that women were involved in the slaveholding process here with Quakers. Additionally, yeah, the witnesses for Phoebe as well were women. So yeah, it just kind of goes to show that this is something that can happen for both men and women slaveholders. And we will move on.
Now, I want to say something right now. This is the crux of my project. What we got to find out is that these people become free. If you think about, Dave, would you go back to the Manumission that Kitty read? One back. Would you go back? No, the
That's
other
it.
way. Yeah. This legal document was made to a person that they considered inferior in property. What a lot of times happen is that when the owner died or when it was time, they did this. It was a means of control and dominance. If you be a good person and don't tear up nothing and kill my animals and do what I ask you to do or tell you to do, we might free you. A lot of times they wasn't. Enslaved African person was worth thousands of dollars and their unpaid labor. And now with my leading, I have to find a way to show people that they were worthy of coming out of history and finding out what happened to them. And that's what we're going to try to do. Okay, Dave. Leading goals. Find out what happened to the manumitted. Were they freed? Uncover their lives and family trees. Uncover how they survived. Search for their names and location. If you remember, the last one was like 1790 of the 339 that was manumitted papers we have. Well, that was still in time when slavery was in its heyday. They gave a person a piece of paper that they couldn't read and let them go. I asked them, the architects at the Haverford, did they give them any money? No. Did they give them any land? No. Did they help them get to Canada and to free, for real freedom? No. If you remember, they wasn't under a care of a slaveholder anymore. And you could knock them on the head and take them back and to re-enslave them because the black person could never talk against the white person. That was the okie dokie. And what I want to know is how many did these people get their freedom and what did freedom mean for these people? Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to try to just go quickly through a couple of questions. This slide is just to talk about how Quakers got to where they got to. And in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about what was going on in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia at this time, because all of this helps us understand what was going on. Just like what Avis just said, there were lots of things going on around folks at that time. So whether Quakers did this or didn't do this, we know other people did or didn't do that. And we know that in some cases this was true for Quakers. And what we're trying to find out is, instead of just dealing with a few anecdotes where somebody has found some information, how do we figure this out across the board? How do we answer this question for all 413? So this whole movement towards becoming a society which said enslavement was wrong and immoral, that process began there, as I said, in 1780 and 1688 with the Germantown Minute. But there were powerful people in the Quaker world who were also powerful in the political world. So you had people who were elected officials in the state assembly and in the city council, who were also the clerks and members of the publishing committee of the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, and also officers, people in responsibility for the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting itself. And they were enslavers. So the peak of enslavement among Quakers was around 1720, at which point more than half of all the Quakers in the Philadelphia Yearly Meeting were enslavers. So on the one hand, you have people saying this is wrong. And on the other hand, there's a lot of benefits financially to having free labor. And so people were trying to establish themselves, and they said, wow, this is such a good idea. I get to have somebody who does all this work for me and I don't have to pay him. So we can't answer every individual motivation, but we can say this was not a couple of folks doing this. This was a widespread practice among Quakers. But we can also say on the other side, but it wasn't everybody. So we have to be careful when we talk about this to be clear that there was a lot of stuff going on that shouldn't have been going on, but there was also people who were not participating. Both of those things were happening at the same time. And since a lot of people on this, in the audience, so to speak, have Quaker backgrounds, you understand that we make decisions through unity. And so it sometimes takes a long time before everybody gets to see things the same way. And in this case, it was distorted because there were people in positions of authority within Quakerdom who prevented certain discussions from happening. So they actually prevented anti-slavery tracts from being published by the Friends Publishing House at that time. And it really took some of those early people dying before the conversation could actually move forward. But that movement within Quakerdom towards abolitionists dovetailed with what some people call the Quaker Reformation. And Quakers had come from England where they had been persecuted. And all of a sudden, they're in a position where they are becoming politically powerful. And they ended up with the majority of the members of the Pennsylvania Assembly were Quakers, even though they didn't make up more than half of the population of Pennsylvania. And they became wealthy because they were good at what they did and they had free labor just like other people. And because they had both wealth and power, there were people within Quakerdom who were saying, wait a minute, we are getting far away from trying to serve the spirit as we understand it. We are not doing what we as Quakers said we were all about. We are not following God's leadings. We seem to be putting other things in front of that. And that movement towards saying we need to go back to our roots, you might call it fundamentalism if you want at this point. It was a reaction against wealth and greed. It was political power. And then the question of immorality came up when you had the legislature being asked to contribute money to go and kill Native people. And so if you're a Quaker and you have the idea that we're supposed to be peaceful people who honor that of God and everyone, one of our early testimonies has been nonviolence and against killing people. And now people who were in positions of power but who were Quakers were asked to do that. And this kind of came to a cap around what we now used to call the French and Indian War, now sometimes called the 7 Years' War, which was the 1760s. So their movement towards saying we've gotten away from where we want to be overlapped with the people saying slavery is evil and should be stopped. And that's what moved that, and some powerful people dying is what made it possible for the decision and coming together for the 1758 minute and then later the 1774 minute. But I can't really talk about this without talking about the other half of this equation, which is freedom versus equality. So even there were a very few number of Quakers who actually had day-to-day interactions with these enslaved or formerly enslaved people, in which they were able to assess and their intelligence, their character, and all the other attributes. And so and those folks, Anthony Benezet, who ran a school for enslaved and then later for freed Blacks, was one of the early people who said there is no difference that I can discern between these Africans and the white kids that I used to teach. But that was a very uncommon position. So even when Quakers said, we recognize that they are human beings and we recognize that it's wrong to enslave them, they did not say these are people who are equal to us. And so this idea of inferiority continued for most people. And so there was an opportunity at the time of this, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. There was an opportunity when Quakers could have embraced these newly freed people and invited them to become full members of their meetings, and they chose not to. And they were not forbidden from attending, but they were often put into separate places, segregated places, under the stairs, up in the balcony, in places where it was a very clear signal that you're not quite like us. And so that's another important part of this project, because we think part of why Quakers today in the United States are as white as we are is because we made that decision back then, and we're still paying that price. All right, we're going to move on to the history, the Philadelphia context. So I just want to kind of give you an idea. These folks got released in a very interesting time in American history. So there were Black codes that were set up in terms of enslaved people back in the 1726s, and it was illegal for Black men to have sex with white women, and if you had managed to get your freedom, but they could accuse you of vagrancy, they could make you into an indentured servant. They didn't put you back into slavery, but you weren't really allowed to make your own decisions. And so for that reason, there were not a lot of free Black people. That and the fact that people died, the death rate among Black people, both enslaved and free, was very high. And so the number of enslaved Africans was not able to sustain itself in the Philadelphia area without the importation of new folks. So anyway, by 1765, there were 100 free people in the Philadelphia city. But these manumissions, and Quakers were not the only ones who had gotten to that point. So by, as I said, 1720 before was the height in terms of percentage of Quaker enslavement. But people were beginning to say, this is not right. And it wasn't just Quakers. There were Methodists and Presbyterians and other folks who were also getting there. And so by 1740, the numbers had gone down considerably for Quakers, and people were being manumitted, but those documents are not included in the collection we're looking at because they weren't required to be registered with the meetings. So once this happened, once the manumissions began, the number of free Black people began to build up. And so by 1766, it had gone from 100 to 600. By 1783, it was up to 1,000. And then by 1793, it was up to 2,000. And part of it is that the Gradual Manumission Act of 1780, while it had lots of problems, it did signal to the world that Philadelphia was actually interested in not having slavery anymore. And so people began to come, free blacks began to come to Philadelphia, and people who escaped from slavery came to Philadelphia because they thought they would be okay there. And part of the Manumission Act that was good and wasn't as full of loopholes was that if you were an enslaved person and you were brought to Pennsylvania, you could not stay for more than 6 months, or you would automatically be given your freedom. So there was a reason why the word got around and people began to flock to Philadelphia. And so for the first time in American history, there was a concentration of free black people that was large enough that they could begin to create their own community, create their own institutions, and they did. And so we ended up with the first black churches in America at that time. We ended up with the first lending associations, the first schools, and a whole series of community institutions that were designed to help this newly created community make their own decisions and stand on their own feet and figure out how to conduct their lives in the way that they wanted to. So that's the world that these folks that are in the 339 Manumission, if they got freedom, that was the world they stepped into. And just one other quick thing to say about that is that people did not move around in the 1700s the way we do today. So if you needed to go somewhere, you either walked or you rode a horse. And if you wanted to take any of your stuff, it was put on a cart. And so how far people moved was very limited. And so we have everything we've looked at suggested that these folks did not go far, except the Revolutionary War happened at the same general time. And some black folks went with the British. And so if they did, we may never hear from them again. But others did not, and they stayed in the area. Some joined, and we have some pieces of some people who ended up being prominent, so we know about them. But what we don't know is about the rest. And so we're trying to figure out, as these folks got freedom, how did they fit into this emergence of the first black culture, and then eventually this whole set of backlash where there were anti-black riots and happening about every 5 years, where the white folks would come into the black sections of town and burn businesses and try to destroy things. And then eventually the second set of black codes, which really talked about what you could do based upon your skin color and your heritage. And that was really different than your status as a slave in the first set. And these black codes were used later as a model for the black codes in the South after the Civil War. So, and then the final thing, of course, is, as Avis pointed out, the fact that you were free also meant that you needed a certain degree of protection, because there were people who could kidnap you and take you down south and sell you as an enslaved person. And so people always had to be thinking about that as well. Okay, that's just the context.
Okay, I'll update you a little history lesson from Professor Dennis. I want to be authentic with the audience. I asked Dennis to talk to you about the history because he's a white man, and for some reason, people can hear what a white person say and take it for the truth that it is. Y'all would doubt me if I tried to tell you how things was. So my good man, Dennis, is here, and he explained it to you. And why I bring that up, friends, is because in the Religious Society of Friends, we have a big problem with racism still. And look how many years ago we're talking about here, and look what in 2023, the 21st century, and we still dealing with that. I got kicked out of Upper Dublin friends meeting because of the discrimination and racism that I faced, and they thought. I can't tell you how much that affected me. And now here, the opportunity to find out what happened to the enslaved people of Quakers. We have to look at this history now. How are we going to make it better? I'm a Quaker, and I'm here. And when they, Haverford brought the project to me, and I looked at that, 339 people, or for real, it's 413. The 339 is the papers, but the people is 413. I said, do y'all really understand what y'all telling me? The Quakers had enslaved people from the 1600s until this time, and they only let 339 people loose? What made these innocent souls come up to have my attention? First thing I said, it probably was their biological children. Of the tens and thousands of millions that they trafficked in us, they only released 339, 413. And that, to tell you the truth, that pissed me off. That hurts my feelings. Because we're supposed to be a beloved community, and we still struggling with this. I'm not inferior. I'm a child of God, just like you are. And I want to try to find what happened to these people that the Quakers, the early Quakers, exploited and killed and raped and murdered. It just upsets me so much that God put this on my plate to see if I can straighten this out with the help of good people like y'all. Y'all took your time out of your day to listen to what we had to say. And I'm getting emotional now. So David, would you take over?
Okay. So in that vein, thinking of how the process might happen in order to continue this work and this research, this work will begin in the Quaker archives of Haverford College in Pennsylvania, searching for information about the names and locations of these innocent people, as well as information about the kinds and amounts of support that may have been offered to these newly freed people. Researchers will then move to county census records, birth and death records, wills, Black church records, records of the abolitionist societies who also provided support to newly freed people, historical societies, almshouses, insurance companies, newspapers, and other resources with records from the period of interest.
When I became a part of this Haverford project, I asked that when it's time to release the information, would you do it with the descendants community in my backyard? And so I had everything all together, and I had a Pandora's box. This historical information that's just newly uncovered that opened up a lot of questions about were Quakers Quaker-like? How could you do that to innocent human beings? One time at one of the memorial services I did, I said, if my ancestors would have ran faster, you would have never seen me. And look, I got to talk to y'all now about this. What I'm saying, y'all, is let's use the money that Quakers had by exploiting my people and use it for healing and find out what happened to these people, where their descendants at. That's like I sit in the meeting house at Abington with the descendants of the slavers in this document. Their descendants is here somewhere. There was red line neighborhoods like my neighborhood. Black people couldn't live all over the place. It's a concentrated sections that we can find them. And you know, like the curiosity of the unknown. This is wonderful thing we all can get behind, black and white, Jew and Gentile, Christian and non-Christians, to make this world a better place. I never felt safe. Not ever. My dad and them, they came up from the South and thinking they would make a good life, and they had us and threw us out there with white people. The teachers wasn't happy to have us in their classroom. The neighborhood didn't want us around. I just never felt safe. And now I'm coming into white spaces, Quaker meeting houses, and that terrifies me. What I got to keep me together is, I know my God is a mighty God. He said, I got you, Avis. Whatever you got to go through, I got you. And a lot of people try to pat me on the back. Oh, Avis, you're just so wonderful for doing this. But I'm trying to save my soul. Just like my biological father told me when he told me to do something, he expected me to do it. He asked me so he knew I could do it. And that's like God. He make way open for this project to get this far. And as you will see with our presentation, how far we have gotten it. I hope you understand we worked real hard on this presentation, and I just got out a script. So let's go back on script. To enslave another human being is wrong. We know that. Human trafficking right now is illegal. But back in that day, the federal government said it was legal to enslave Black people. Quaker enslavers have never been held accountable for their actions. The Religious Society of Friends, which I am one, has benefited from slavery and thus owe a debt and apology. I wanted this to be in there because you do owe Black people in America an apology. The Religious Society of Friends in America, by my people being burnt, lynched, raped, and all the other atrocities that they could do with a human being that they had total control of. It's time to pay back some of that. I don't know how we're going to do it, but it's time. Next.
So thinking further about how this work might be accomplished, we have plans to partner with Howard University in Washington, D.C., which is one of the historically Black colleges and universities, and they will manage the research component via their Center for Equitable Economy and Sustainable Society. The university will create a website for the 339 Manumissions and Beyond Project, where information uncovered will be publicly available for all. Genealogical information will then be collected in a standardized format to allow uploading to other major genealogical organizations, and consequently descendants will not be limited to discovering about their ancestors solely through our project or this website. You're muted, Kitty. No.
This is about us, our group. Donations to this fund are managed by a fund advisory committee, a majority Quaker, majority African American group, that's what Avis calls her A-team, of individuals spread across the country. Funds directed to Howard University will be restricted to the works described. The 339 Manumissions and Beyond Project is a donor-advised fund with Friends Fiduciary Corporation in Philadelphia. Friends Fiduciary is a Quaker-affiliated nonprofit financial investment firm. Friends Fiduciary Corporation was founded in 1898 by Quakers to serve Quakers, and since its inception has been a nonprofit entity governed by an all-Quaker board. Friends Fiduciary works to embody Quaker values in its investments and its operations, guided by long-standing and broadly held testimonies of simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship.
I hope you kind of understood what that is. We created a fund that if all of us go up there tomorrow, this project can keep going on. And nobody's hands will be in it. It'll go right to fiduciary, and they do it, and you get your deduction paper for your taxes, and the project can keep on going. Who got this one?
I'm going to tell you about the folks that are not the four of us that are on this list. So, of course, you've been introduced to Avis and me and Kitty and David. So let me just tell you a little bit about the folks who are not on this call today. So Stephanie Leonard is an African-American research biologist who is not a Quaker, but lived in Philadelphia for 10 or 11 years and became friends with Avis and worked on some projects with her through the NAACP. Bray is a African-American who is a Quaker member of Wilmington Meeting, lives in Alabama, and is a professor and a consultant. Wood Bolden is a Quaker, white Quaker from West Virginia, who's been a history professor and is retired and a member of the Southern Appalachian Yearly Meeting and Association. Tina Lawson is an African-American attorney in Philadelphia who's worked with Avis on some projects related to schools and some civil rights stuff. Chester McCoy is an African-American Quaker from Maryland, who's also been quite active in some issues of just talking about race within the Society of Friends.
Well, I'd like to say two of them are enslaved family, Kitty and Wood. They want to know what happened to the people that were enslaved by Quakers.
So to donate, you can go to you see the website here, and I believe it's just been put in the chat. So please copy it and keep it so that you can make a donation through Friends Fiduciary. I found out the hard way that you can't just click on the Friends Fiduciary website and have this come up. You need this link. And our project is a reparative project with the full recognition of the damage done to the enslaved African and to the generational wealth gained by the Quaker enslavers. Restoring the descendants' family histories is a small but important attempt to repair some of the damage. So make a note, please, of the link to make donations.
So let me jump in one other quick thing. Somebody in the chat was telling me about the work of their individual meetings. So we are, of course, we need money for the project, but we also need information. And some people's family histories are quite extensive and diaries, and that would be very useful and helpful. And it's not going to show up in the Haverford archives or in other archives in the Philadelphia area. So if you know about these things, that would be great. If your monthly meeting has done work on slavery and you've identified people who were enslaved by the meetings, if you've tried to do this on the small level, then we would be very happy to and anxious to see what you've come up with, what information you've had. This is an open project, and we are happy to partner with anybody who has information that would fit into the work. So, of course, we need your money, but we also need information, and some of you may have information that would be very helpful.
Thank you all for listening to our presentation and learning about kind of the work that we've been doing and our goals for the future. Our emails are here on this final slide. If folks have a question that they think of later, we don't get to during the Q&A. Additionally, I'll be dropping the Facebook link in the chat for folks, where we will be posting bigger updates about the project as they begin to occur on this Facebook page. So be sure to follow if you want to hear more. Once again, thank you so much. We're really thrilled to be here and be invited and do all this work. And then, yeah, here is the final slide.
Okay, folks, we at the end. I wanted to end with the names again. This is a deeply felt thing to me, and I hope that you felt it. We worked hard on this presentation, and it's being taped so other people that wasn't here at this moment can see what we are doing and what's been happening in the world of the Religious Society of Friends. If you only give once a month, please think of our project. And thank you for listening to us.